moving on to the third spot, and let's see how this goes over with you guys. I have the Washington Capitals in the third spot in this division. I actually really like what the Capitals were able to do this offseason. I have some concerns with their back end, but you know what? They completely changed their goaltending in the crease, and they brought in Darcy Kemper, just won a Stanley Cup. Wasn't world beater good, but was good enough for the Colorado Avalanche. He's a good goaltender. And then Charlie Lindgren, who I think is one of these younger goaltenders that is kind of on the rise. Like, you know, we talked about Eric Comrie a few weeks ago, Chad, a guy that could take a step and really grab a hold of an opportunity. I think that Lindgren could as well and be a very good backup for this team. He was almost too good for the American Hockey League last year and the year prior, being with St. Louis. So I like that. Dylan Strome up front had a slow start to last season, but then finished off really well. And then, are you kidding me? A second round pick for Connor Brown in a contract year as well. That is setting up nicely. So I think the only things that are going to hurt this Capitals team is the back end. I don't see Nick Jensen having as big of a year as he did last year. And that was a big bounce back season for him. Before then, that contract wasn't looking too good. So have some concerns about sort of the depth of the back end, and then injuries up front, obviously. Nick Backstrom is the big one, and Tom Wilson is also going to miss some time. But some good opportunities for guys like Strome and Connor Brown, and I like the Capitals. Not really there to say that they're a contender, but they'll be a playoff team, and a very good one. And I've got them in this third spot.
This is the spot most negotiable to me, for sure. I'm fine with putting several teams here. I currently have the Washington Capitals at number 3. Kind of to all the same points as Harper. This team was just quietly good last year, and now they've really fixed the goaltending issue here. I really hope that Vanacek he just needed a change of scenery. We'll see about that. Our favorite saying. I hope that's the case. Sure. I'll throw that one in there just for you. I still love this team's top 6. They're going to get Tom Wilson back eventually. I don't think it's nearly as long as Pacioretty, but I could be wrong. Who knows? And then I think that this team has this ability to kind of solve career issues for players, and I think that's going to be the case for Dylan Strome, kind of in the same way that they did it with Connor Sheary. Like, Connor Sheary was in the AHL, and then they figured it out for him, and they've done it many times in the past. Lars Ehler is a solid NHL player thanks to the Washington Capitals, and I kind of expect that to continue for Connor Brown, Dylan Strome, Connor Sheary, and McMichael is going to be coming into this team. I expected him to play for them last year, watching him in the preseason, so I think that's another big add in not having to spend anything on it. There is always going to be questions about the decor here, especially the deeper you go down, but I think I like this top 4, and they've got some guys who can really game there. So I have Washington at number 3 as well.
Okay, so you guys are a bit higher on the Caps than I am. Shocker, I have a different team at number 3 who is kind of in the same boat as Washington, aging core. I bet you can guess who that is. But I'll talk about Washington first. I think their forward group isn't as deep as we think without those 2 key top 6 members in it, Tom Wilson and Nick Backstrom. Tom Wilson isn't back until probably the new year, maybe December. He's recovering from surgery. And Nick Backstrom, guys, might never play hockey again.
Yeah, I've counted him out when looking at this team.
Yeah, he might never play hockey again. So he's having... where did I write it down here? Okay, so he's having hip surgery. Only 2 other players in the NHL have ever had this surgery. Ryan Kessler and who was the other one? Ryan Kessler had it, and Ed Jovanovski. Ryan Kessler never played a single game after having that surgery. Ed Jovanovski played 37 and never played again after that. So this is a serious injury. He might never play hockey again. I wish the guy all the best. But I think that seriously impacts the Capitals up front, and Tom Wilson too, not having him for half a season. I think it's a bigger impact than some of the other guys we've talked about already, like, for example, Pacioretty on Carolina missing half the year. I think Tom Wilson is more integral to this team than, say, Pacioretty
I agree.
is. And I think that's a major loss up front. I really do like what they've done, though. Like, I like the Connor Brown ad. I like the Dylan Strome ad. I think those are two players who, you know, they got for bargains, really. And those are good depth options. I just think they're missing a little bit of that, you know, they're missing those impact players up front. And I think missing those two guys out of their top six is going to be a serious issue.
Yeah, it's the top end talent, but I mean, they didn't have Backstrom last year as well.
So he played a handful.
I'll say you're not enough to really impact their position. You're definitely right about Wilson. Like, that's going to hurt, but I think that this team has enough depth, and that's the thing. I think it's going to be a little bit more scoring by committee here, although they still have Ovi, Kuznetsov, and Carlson to kind of, you know, be the stars. And let's hope Ovi continues to score 50 goals for them. Or I don't even know how he's doing it anymore, but
he's automatic, man. And same with John Carlson. Like, he's automatic almost a point per game for the last decade. And I have him in my other fantasy league. So trust me, like, I'm hoping this team does well for my own sake. I look at this team, I look at the D-core outside of John Carlson, and I just don't think it's that scary anymore. And the depth up front, sure, but it's lacking high-end talent. And then in net, like, we know that Kemper, you know, is very up and down. He has been his whole career. And Lindgren, you know, he's a young goalie that we don't know too much about. So it's hard to put any stock into, you know, how either of those guys are going to play. So I look at this team and I think they're still good enough to be a playoff team. That's why I have them in the 5 spot. You know, if we see 5 teams from this division make the playoffs, that could happen. Probably not. It'll probably be 4. But it could happen. So I've got them in the playoff conversation.
But you have them in the 5 spot, eh?
Yeah, but the 5 spot for me feels nicer than number 3. But if you guys both have them at number 3, like, obviously then I'm willing to move them up.
Yeah, I like the depth that they've added, recognizing the two major holes that they have in their forward group. And we'll see if TJ Oshie can stay healthy this year. That's been a problem for him. And, you know, on top of Strome and Brown, those two guys that we've mentioned quite a bit, there are a group of young players that could get an opportunity to be in this lineup and make an impact. Casey mentioned Connor McMichael. That's the first name that comes to mind. Hendrix Lapierre, Protas, Brett Leeson. Those are some other names as well that could come into this forward group and really take an opportunity. So I like the Capitals. I think that they really did a good job this summer, again, of just adding some depth, recognizing those major holes that they have in their forward group in particular with those injuries. And on the back end, yes, some concern. Again, Nick Jensen, I don't think is going to have the year that he did last year. Feyervari took a big step forward, and then you've got Carlson and Orlov and a couple of depth guys underneath. But this team is really top heavy. Yes, they don't have Backstrom, but they have Kuznetsov, who has gotten back to his offensive flair. So I'm not as worried as you are, Melbs, about this Caps team, and that's why I've got them in 3.
Yeah. I definitely want to see Lapierre get a shot here, because that was another guy who kind of shocked us last year at the beginning of the season, who looked really good and probably had a chance to play. So I like him to crack this roster as well. And I think that would maybe solve some problems as well. I like to hear it, Chad. I like to hear the argument. And the argument cannot be because they're the Pittsburgh Penguins. And like, I have Pittsburgh at number 4.
Okay.
If we want to transition to this one.
Yep, let's do it.
Mostly because they are the Pittsburgh Penguins, and I'm not allowed to put them outside of a playoff spot because you can't count them out. It's just impossible.
Okay, so do you want to hear it then? Do you want to hear why I have Pittsburgh in the 3 spot? I look at their forward group, and it's virtually the exact same. Just healthy, which I think is a good thing. I look at their defense, and I think it's completely overhauled in a good way. adding a boomer bust guy like Ty Smith, I think, is really important for that for the bottom of the lineup there. And then also Jeff Petrie, who I think is bound to bounce back after a terrible year last year. But we've seen that he's been really good in the past. So I expect somewhere in between, Petrie's prime and what he was last year, which, any improvement from last year would be good. And I think on a team like Pittsburgh, where you actually have some weapons to pass to, I think it makes a lot of sense that he'll have a bounce back year. And then also Jan Ruta, I think, is an underrated pickup for this team as well. I think this team really knows, or each player on this team, I feel like when I look at this lineup, they really know what their role is and what they're supposed to do. And I just feel like cohesively, this team makes a lot of sense and they just fit together perfectly. Not to mention having Tristan Jarry, who was 7th in Vezina voting last year and had a phenomenal season. He's been good for the last couple years. I would expect that to keep up. And same with Casey DeSmith. He had kind of a tough year last year, and he's been up and down throughout his first few years of his career. But I expect him to bounce back and hopefully be good for this team. So I just look at them, and I think they were so good last year. They finished with over 100 points, 103 points. Washington finished with 100. I think they're definitely still in the same conversation in terms of playoff teams, and I could see either one finishing in the 3, 4, or 5 spot. But I picked Pittsburgh because I can't for the life of me bet against them. I think they're still that good. I think having the band back together and everybody there and healthy for an entire season, fingers crossed, knock on wood, I think is going to be the best thing for this team. And I just think they're going to be just as good as they were last year, if not better.
Yeah, I mean, I would put this team, I think they're going to finish the exact same amount of points as the Washington Capitals. Like
about 100, probably.
Like exactly, both of them will be at 100. Like, I just don't really find many differences. The only one I could say is that there's a little bit more of, like, if you're going to be betting on the two, I think there's a little bit more high risk, high reward with the Washington Capitals. And the Pittsburgh Penguins are kind of just like, you're probably not getting any money back.
Yeah, they're safer. They're safer, and that's why I have them there. I think that's a good way to put it. It makes sense. But the fact that we've talked about these two, Case, and I had Pitt at 3. I guess now, though, we're talking about number 4, right? Because we moved Washington up to 3. Pitt is now number 4. But originally, I had Pitt at 3, Washington at 5. You'll like who I had in the 4 spot. But,
I bet I will.
But, I guess that's going to have to be the number 5 spot now. But before we get into the next team, Harp, anything else to add at Pittsburgh, Washington, this whole thing?
Yeah, I mean, these teams are virtually the same. I mean, 2 generational talents in Ovechkin and Crosby that are I guess you can't really say slowing down, maybe just getting older, not really slowing down, though. I mean, they are still just such key contributors every single night and critical to the success of these two teams. I'm just a little bit higher on the Capitals. I think I agree, Chad. I do like the changes to the back end. I think Ty Smith, it was such a brutal year for him in New Jersey, and he just needed a change of scenery. And same with Jeff Petrie. 4 consecutive 40-point seasons before last year. It's not like the guy just forgot how to play hockey, So, and he wanted to be back in the U.S. with his family, right? And so he was dealing with a lot of personal issues. So if you're looking at a bounce back player candidate of the year or whatever, you could certainly throw Jeff Petrie into that conversation, I would think. I really just have some questions with their forward group up front. Big deals for Rickard Rakell and still term left on a big deal for Jason Zucker. Those 2 guys who are expected to be key contributors, I'm just not sure because they haven't been able to stay healthy. Especially Zucker there the last couple of years. He hasn't played that much. And Rakell has dealt with his fair share of injuries. And then I just really don't know what this team has in the bottom 6 other than Teddy Bluger. I really don't know. Kasperi Kapanen, what's he going to do? He's been so up and down and out of the lineup and then back in and just inconsistent. And I just don't know. But I mean, I could see this team finishing third, fourth, or fifth, but I've got them just under the Capitals in that fourth spot.
And I think that's fair. Like, I think they're in the same tier. Like I said before we started, it would be nice if we could do tiers, because I think it would be easier to, be right if you have a team in a tier, and a different team in another. But I think these two are definitely in the same tier. That's why I've got them roughly in the same position. If we're talking points, like Casey said, I think they're probably going to be roughly the same amount of points, around that 100 mark. And, they're both definitely, they can be playoff teams if things go well. So, I think it's fair to put Washington 3, Pittsburgh 4, and then number 5, that's where it gets interesting.